Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Celtic here Flagship podcast. We're making this a regular thing, Quinny. Now, Celtic's getting into a wee bit of a rhythm, as are you and I. We're here after another Champions League. I don't want to call it a disappointment, because I think we're going to look at this really in depth over this and try and put a bit of positive spin on it. Looking forward to the next season, there's no doubt about it that we were a wee bit hopeful, maybe too hopeful getting into this competition. You and I were in the mix zone after the game on Tuesday night, and we could see the disappointment even in the Celtic players coming out, especially Rio Hatate, who we saw look absolutely gutted when he was doing his, remember those laps around the pitch?
Yeah.
His flip-flops on. Immediately after the game, though, what was your thoughts? I felt a bit gutted, much like probably Rio Hatate did after the game.
I think everyone was pretty gutted in the immediate aftermath of it because it was in our hands. We were winning, and it's a very disappointing game because I was saying kind of in the build up to it, and we were chatting after the game as you were saying, but like it was always going to come down to the two games against Shakhtar, and for the campaign being a failure, they're the games where you look at in terms of where we've really dropped the ball, because when the draw is made, again, to say this in the kindest possible way, people that are maybe less aware see Leipzig and go, oh, well, Rangers knocked them out last year. We can fight with them. And Real Madrid, they're not the behemoth of old. All of that is on the face of it relatively true. But when you do look at the draw, Shakhtar is a game where you expect points home and away, where Celtic should be going toe-to-toe, should be putting some sort of stamp on the campaign in those games. And then the other games are the ones where you really yardstick the team and go, oh, how far away are we? And where is the room for growth in the team, if that makes sense? So for us to be winning that game and then ultimately to finish with another draw and eliminated ultimately, that was just a sore one. It was just kicking the balls.
As one of the lucky people going to Madrid next week, I think even some of us were just hoping that there was maybe something to cling on to and it wasn't going to be a dead rubber. Obviously Real Madrid haven't confirmed top spot in the group yet, I don't think, after Leipzig beat them the other night. So Leipzig were looking to beat Shakhtar. Shakhtar's still, I think, in with a shout a finishing second in the group. So that's a big game for both those teams. And obviously Real Madrid will want to finish top, so they'll be wanting to beat Celtic. Feeding all that in, Quinny, I think I've already discussed on here before about looking at the group when it was drawn, people's expectations, looking at it. I think I've already spoke in terms of Leipzig with this after one of the two games. I had a look at Shakhtar yesterday. Obviously a team in massive transition, lost a lot of players due to the conflict in Ukraine through no fault of their own. And at this time, looking at Shakhtar as a team, I had a look at their European kind of record over the past 10 years or so, just to get a flavour of where they're at as a club, because I find it really, really interesting at this point in time that Ange Postecoglou continually talks about Celtic competing at this level on a consistent basis. It's well documented Celtic hadn't been in the tournament for 5 years. I think we managed to stop the record the other night of the most defeats at home in the competition. I think the record was 8. Wow. We managed to get that draw, so that would have been a record had we not drawn or won the game. And so we managed to put that hoodoo to bed. But in terms of those comments from Ange Postecoglou about Celtic competing at this level on a consistent basis, Shakhtar, to give some of our listeners a flavour of them, I think over the past 11 years, Quinny, have qualified for the group stages of the Champions League on at least 10 occasions out of 11 years, which is a great record. Obviously, there's been a lot of transition in those teams. At a point, I think they've reached the quarter-final, possibly in 2 occasions. They've certainly reached the last round of 16 and maybe 2 or 3. But just in terms of that, we don't want to compare Celtic to other teams, but in terms of consistency and longevity in the competition, I know Bruges is one that people have been wanting to draw comparisons to. They get hammered last night with Porto at home. But take the team out, the players, the personnel, whatever, it's just about that consistency. That's the only thing I want to see drawn a comparison, but with Celtic towards these teams is that consistency and the level of football. And I think to do that, one season is not going to fix it. Whatever that old phrase is about swans in summer, it's not coming to my mind here on the spot. So yeah, just in terms of that, Quinny, give us your thoughts on what I'm talking about there in terms of consistency at this level, and those comparisons drawn between teams like Shakhtar and Bruges.
Well, for me, as I'm kind of looking across all the group stages, like all the kind of tables at the moment, like the main clubs that are the clubs that are in the same position as us in terms of they've probably not featured in the Champions League very often over the last 5 years is Copenhagen 2 points, Maccabi Haifa 3 points, us 2 points. Zagreb maybe have actually been in it a fair amount, but they always get whipped. But they're on 4 points. Bruges, as you mentioned, who are on 10. Victoria Pilsen, who have got 0. So that's the kind of, when you are coming in to play a first seed and a second seed that are routinely, Shakhtar aside, when you're coming in to play like the Bayerns, the Inters, even the Portos and the Madrids, Liverpools and these types of teams, it's, they're feeling like acclimatized to the level and to the competition. And that's why the first and second seed invariably do dominate their game, because the third and fourth seed, which is us in this kind of scenario, have things that are unyet determined or as of yet undetermined. Like can individual players step up? Can people win a game? All that kind of thing hasn't come into it yet. The teams that we want to be drawn a contemporary with, teams like Sporting Lisbon, I guess you'd maybe even say Sevilla, Benfica, I guess where Bruges sit at the moment is a Champions League campaign.
Leverkusen, probably another one after playing them last year.
Yeah, definitely. These teams as well, like for them, a big part of it, and I was saying this on I made some content on my YouTube and TikToks and all that kind of stuff yesterday, is like there's proper cohesion in their teams, when they go, and fair enough, in modern day football, you need a squad of 20 plus and you do need to game manage and minute manage and all that stuff, of course. But even when they're going through these cycles, their domestic performances don't really change too much. And that's something that we've all been quite aware of, that after the first, that you'll remember really well, and hopefully everyone kind of watching and listening this will remember as well, but there was a lot of chat early season about this extended pre-season that we had with no midweeks and no qualifiers. We're just going weekend to weekend, and that was apex Celtic this season. That's when we were killing teams. We were scoring for fun. You could make 5 subs at the 60th minute, and tempo wouldn't change. Standard would maybe get up on some occasions. And since then, if you actually go and look at all the starting 11s, and a lot of this stuff has been forced upon us with injuries to Carter Vickers, to Starfelt, even Jenz was injured and sick for a while, even Welsh was sick for a while when he was on form. Never mind going further up into the team, all those well-documented problems. So since that period there, not that the wheels have come off the wagon, but probably all the bolts on them have came a bit loose and everything's just a bit rickety and a wee bit. Yeah, it still kind of is going in the same direction, but it's kind of veering off and it's maybe not totally in control anymore. And these other teams, they've had that to a greater and lesser extent, having watched some of them to greater and lesser extents. But we have been quite, we've been quite victim to that. I think that was my main takeaway from that Shakhtar game, is there was great spells where everyone played brilliant, but it was for 2 minutes from Rio here. And then at the end of the game, the 60th minute before Kyogo gets subbed, he looked really good for about 5 minutes. And it wasn't all linked up and it wasn't succinct. And it was just, it was like the first game of the group stage. That's what it was like. It was as if we just started the campaign and it was like, oh, as a game, that was the kind of feeling I got from the actual performance in terms of the cohesion of the team.
Yeah, and I think even people would look at, previous games, even the game over in Warsaw against Shakhtar, the home game against Real Madrid, etc., and looking at the performance and saying Tuesday night was by no means Celtic's best performance in the competition, yet they've still managed a draw out it. A draw that probably could have been defeat if you look at the balance of chances in the game. Celtic did create, but we didn't create like we have been in previous games. And obviously I think everybody's seen that stat going about that Celtic's practically scored a goal every 22 shots. And for those of us out there that love XG, including myself, that is one that's a tear your hair out one. But just in terms of other teams, Quinn, at this point in time, because I think it's important to understand the balance of European football at this point in time, where Celtic's at, where we need to get to. The other teams heading out the Champions League in week 5, along with ourselves, Ajax being one, but a team that Celtic get compared to lots and lots of times. Atletico Madrid, one who was a real shock surprise in real uh, crazy fashion last night with the penalty miss, hitting the crossbar, etc., etc. Leverkusen, I think they're possibly out the Champions League. Need to double check that one. I know Barcelona's certainly one of the big guns who are out.
Yep.
Pilsen, you already mentioned. They've got the second worst goals conceded record in the competition. I think -17, only bettered by Rangers and -18.
Right.
Copenhagen is another team that you've mentioned heading out, and another one of the big guns is Juventus. Probably the shocks in there are Barcelona and Juventus. I know we're here to talk about Celtic, but it just shows you, just to kind of diverge away from our main talking point, but Barcelona's, to me, a real crazy one, Quinny, and that they deferred all that TV rights money to make the signings that they did in the summer under Xavi. It was a tough group when you looked at it coming out, Inter and Bayern Munich, but when you take such a big risk, you're looking for it to pay off, and that's
Yeah.
certainly not happened for Barcelona this season.
Barcelona are very much in the same situation as us in that respect, that they've just got too many players vying for the same positions, and for different reasons, they've just not gelled in. Like Xavi's Barcelona last year was much better in that respect, that like you knew that they would get to like the 60th, 70th minute and they would probably find a couple of goals if they hadn't got them already. Whereas this year, like I haven't watched them as close, but they definitely do. I just know with the amount of players that they've got fighting for the front three positions, it's just crazy. But Inter Milan and Bayern, I just want to come back to Benfica, for example, because I've heard a lot of people. I was listening to a lot of fan media stuff as we were leaving after I left you and we left the game, and I always just like to try and get myself out of my head and try and hear what everyone else is kind of saying and whatever. And when it does come to like the Ajaxes and the Benficas, one thing that I hear, whether it's comments and streams or people on screen or whatever, is like, they spend all this on wages and all the rest of it, right? But see Benfica, I can't remember exactly how it is. This is a little bit of a dated statistic, if you like. But a couple of years ago, there was a big thing about them within coaching circles because they'd hired their first ever youth coach in like 23 years or something. Benfica, this is, and that's from like under 9s all the way through to under 21s. They just don't, that's a very close knit operation from start to finish, and that's why Benfica, like, aside from like head coaches and any like star transfers or whatever, but that's why the bedrock of that team is always copy paste. Benfica are always going to be all right somehow. And Ajax come into that mold as well, which just with the whole infrastructure of the club is just like to a rhythm, to a song. And Barca, kind of supposed to have that a little bit, but they've just got too many people there at the moment. But that's also a part of this that we've been missing, because as we're discovering that identity, like you were saying, like the thing about, is it one swallow doesn't make a summer? Is that what it is? I know you said it was swans.
Right, yep.
But
there's something about swans, but I think it's a swallow. That's right.
Yeah. But we've only had like maybe 4 or 5 months of good Ange ball last season. This season we had that nice little period, that extended pre-season, if you like, and then it's been, the catalogue of situations that have happened thereafter. But, every one of these are teams, when you look at them, and if you're to rip them open and really look at their squad and look at their coaching staff and everything, like, we've had some mad level of upheaval. And like you were saying there, for the XG to be as high as it is, and for the goals, that's a brilliant place. It really is. It's a brilliant place to be, because like we've went into, and we've had tougher groups, obviously, right? But we've went into groups and we've not had 64 shots at all. We've not even had a sniff of 2 shots a game. I remember those nights, and that's like, wow, like we've got so far to go. Whereas now, like, we're just that far away. We've not had Jota, we've not had McGregor, 2 huge parts of the team. Everything
Starfelt too.
And to be like, we are that away, like luck, that's where we are away, really. In terms of some of the chances hitting posts and somebody just catching it with the right side of their boot and stuff like that. That's really been the difference across the campaign, which is a great place.
But is that the biggest frustration? And I think it's why we're all feeling so frustrated. And it's more frustration and disappointment, and that you've seen how close we've got. And just possibly, Quinn, if we were at the point that we're maybe talking about those kind of games that you remember back, and it's sluggish, and you're maybe holding a team down, you're getting absolutely battered, and maybe you only lose 1-0. I would much rather be in the position that we are just now and looking towards something that's there, because I think we're only going to add to it and take another level up Who we don't know that's going to be, but it's definitely going to happen. And
Yeah.
from everything we've led to believe, do you think that's the biggest frustration as we've seen how close we've got? And it's just at that point, it's just not happened. Add into the mix of that Starfelt, Jota, Callum McGregor, and also Cameron Carter-Vickers, I think, over in Leipzig, wasn't it? Vickers didn't start.
Yeah. Yeah, again, away to Leipzig, it was Jenz and Welsh that started centre back, and they weren't even, they were actually pretty good in that game. They weren't
Yeah,
even really
two of
part
our
of any.
best performers, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think laying it all out, all things considered, it is just disappointing, the actual record that we're leaving the campaign with and whatever. But as I said in one of those little TikTok things, like the worst advice you can ever get in your professional life, and it doesn't matter what your job is just keep doing what you're doing. Because whenever you're after advice and whenever you're trying to progress, you want something new to get better at, or you want something to improve on. But when you're at that stage of you are just doing everything right, you just need to keep going. That, for a lot of people, for a lot of teams, for a lot of clubs, whatever, that can be hard, because that's just about self-motivation and really grinding in and digging in and pushing and making, that 2% go in your favour.
And when you're looking at that kind of that bigger picture with that, it's important that you've got a manager who believes in you, which the players all certainly feel, and they certainly believe in his philosophy. And I think that's incredibly important. That possibly, 2 seasons ago, I think Celtic in Europe, that there was a complete lack of identity. Great going up 2-0 in the San Siro, it then collapses. Take those results against Lille out of it, games against Sparta Prague. Celtic looked miles off bang average European teams 2 seasons ago. Last season we looked okay. I think last season was probably too early to judge, just due to that upheaval that you probably mentioned, Quinny. This season, getting into the Champions League was exciting. But in terms of what you're talking about with infrastructure, and this is not to try and make excuses for Ange Postecoglou, when you take the flip of that, infrastructure comes from the people at the very top of the football club. And if you've not had a consistent and you mentioned cohesion with other clubs there, plan through the years, this is how you've ended up at this point. And it's about fixing those rights and wrongs. Obviously, we've got a new CEO that heads the board now. We've got a manager who's completely different from our previous manager. It is about having that plan for the future and being one step ahead of the game, which Celtic at European level haven't been for a long time. And that's about, when you get that Champions League money, it's fantastic, it's great. How do you use it? Where does it get invested into? Does it go a bit into the youth football? Does it go into the first team? Does it go into scouting? Wherever it goes, it's used properly to build forward for the Champions League. It's not just used to say, okay, feet up, let's win the league title, and that's it. We're not bothered about the Champions League. Domestic football's Celtic's bread and butter. It will always be. But for us as fans, with the highs of 67, with those years under Stein getting to quarterfinals, semi-finals for the run under Martin, we want Celtic to be ambitious and try and make inroads in European football.
I don't think there's been a better opportunity for us to do that over the last 20 years since the kind of. I think the Strachan era we did well, obviously, in that, but I think that was we kind of went against the trend qualifying from that group and getting into the last 16.
We weren't really building towards anything under Gordon. No disrespect to Gordon, he'd probably even admit that himself, and that's why the wheels effectively came off it in that kind of fourth season.
Yeah,
Done fantastically well domestically. Performed tremendously well in the Champions League, but it wasn't really building for something. And then after 4 years, Gordon was gone, and came Tony, and you were out in your backside against Arsenal.
Yeah, and because since after the O'Neill era and the real invention of proper money in football, transfers for hundreds of millions and all that kind of stuff, since kind of O'Neill and then all that kind of jacked up football finances that have happened over the last 20 years, it has really drowned us out of the player market, and there's been a lot of reimagining having to go on across European football. And like you've just said there, we've kind of stumbled through the last 10, 15 years. And I think we've referenced this in a podcast not too long ago, but with some of the back level, the backroom stuff that's been happening under Postecoglou and that kind of stuff, it does feel that we're finally kind of waking up and smelling the coffee to how we can actually. There's plenty of examples of people that don't spend hundreds of millions to go and sign Neymar and whatever, that can get to semi-finals and quarterfinals of the Champions League these days. And It feels like we're overall trying to take that approach, and it's great to see these signs of progress, like the way we are, and it does frustrate us immensely, but it is. It feels like for the first time anyway, under the manager and the way we're squad building now, that is the approach that we're trying to take with like the kind of blend of youth and experience that he's brought in and released, over the time that he's been here. Because even like under Ronnie Dylan, like I thought, do you know what? It feels like we're just melding into being a Europa League club. That was chat for like a few years. Like we're just
Totally agree with you in that. I totally agree with you in that. And the signs were
that
there
was
for 2
kind of
seasons.
that was kind of okay for like a season, because if that gets you a base, like, and we've seen with plenty of clubs, if you can have a season or two in Europa League and get to quarters and semis, then that's maybe something to build on going into Champions League. That's when some clubs maybe move into that division, like Salzburg and Seville and Ajax and these types of guys. They've all done well in Europa League, notably over the last like 5-6 years. Shakhtar as well, won it within the last 10 years as well, I'm sure.
But even Quinny, I think, going back to your previous manager who had managed in the Champions League, Brendan Rodgers, under that as a plan, when Celtic had complete domestic superiority, we were the dominant side, winning everything in our way. It's the best years I've had supporting Celtic, we didn't make any sort of impact in European football.
No.
Really until actually the final season in that quadruple treble, when Neil Lennon came in and we topped the group for the first time in Europa League and looked as if
Yeah.
we might do something in the knockouts, until Copenhagen came to Celtic Park. But kind of looking at those years, after the first season, we had City, Gladbach, and Barcelona in the group. But what did we finish on that season? 3 points in the group stages, 2 draws against City and 1 against Gladbach.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, 3 points we finished in that season. And in the following season, we get the away result to Anderlecht that I don't think any of us expected. We get beat at Celtic Park with them because we've got the better head-to-head. But we're through. I think the other teams in the group that season were Bayern Munich and PSG. That's right. Both, they beat us home and away both times. So we finished in 3 points in that group. So it was the same, except we progressed through to the Europa League last 32. And in both those campaigns, looking at the January window, Celtic failed to strengthen at all, which all feeds into this. The reason why we're not, at that consistent level that Ange Postecoglou is looking at is due to previous misdemeanors and not backing the manager. And that's why come January time, whether, when this had this chat last week, Quinny, we were saying, whether we were still in European football, whether that be Champions League, Europa League, whatever it would be, or whether we're out, which is the case now, we still need to bring in who we had identified to bring in. Yeah. And I feel that in previous seasons that just wasn't the case, which gives me hope at this point that we have got that cohesion within the boardroom to the management level, that we're building something towards that consistent plan, because it makes perfect sense for Celtic to be in the Champions League. The money that we get in Scottish football isn't there. It's where we need to be, and we need that finance to strengthen properly. But what is your thoughts on that? Would you agree with what I'm saying there as that example of Brendan only 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, because like under Brendan, Lennon and Dyla, I think we got through past Christmas like maybe 4 out of 5 years or something. We had Inter Milan in the group, in the knockouts. We had Zenit, we had Valencia. Those 3 were between Dyla and Rodgers, and I think there might have been another one, but then obviously Lennon, as you say. So, but again, if you look at those squads and you think who still actually is here, who's played Inter Milan in the last 16 Europa League, who's played Zenit, who's played, all the like Lazio away, getting that victory. How many players are actually left from that? And it's very, very few. Like
2. McGregor and Forrest must be 2.
So any kind of green shoots that we've had even over the last like 3 or 4 years, like the current squad outside of the 2-3 players that are knocking around, Forrest, McGregor, probably the easy picks there. No one else was there for it. It was just us, it's the fans. The players don't, and that's kind of, the mismanagement of years gone by is maybe a little part of why the team is so green coming into this, because like, and again, it's not even as if like, if we had Edward or Encham or anything mad like that. I'm not saying if we had any of these guys, it'd have been any better or any different. But the difference you see Forrest, for example, when he comes into any of these matches compared to Abada, he doesn't actually do much better than Abada, but he's present in the match. He's happy to take on the ball. You notice him interfering with play. And with Abada, for example, who registered 157 Champions League minutes this season, other than that scuff shot that ultimately ends up with Giakoumakis scoring last night or the night before, I don't remember anything Abada's done this Champions League campaign whatsoever. You know, as an example, you know.
Yeah, no, and looking at our squad, you know, that's the inexperience of it, because even if we even had players who had been around the building for maybe 3-4 seasons, I'm thinking a guy like Stephen Wells possibly, who came into the Celtic side under Neil Lennon towards the end of that kind of quadruple treble run.
Yep.
That was his first taste at the Champions League. Greg Taylor was signed that season, first taste at the Champions League. So even the kind of, if you go from guys like Abada, who's obviously 21, there's a lot to come there from Liel Abada. Same goes for Matt O'Reilly, and the same goes for a couple of boys. But even people who's been there for a wee while now, you know, I mentioned Taylor, I've mentioned Welsh. But lad Scott being in the mix, why not? Because he played over in Valencia and stuff.
Yeah.
There's been no really consistent runner pattern in European football at all for these guys to do the, you know, find a level in it and get better, which is exciting in terms of the guys that I've mentioned there, Abada, O'Reilly. We can even add, I think, Rio Hatat into that mix.
Yeah.
The other night, it looks as if his mind had gone. I think he knew that at a point when he was just kind of in the middle of the park, Quinny. And it was like a 2-yard pass. It was like, just take the ball off me, please. I don't want the ball. And, you know, but again, I keep going back to, he's only been playing professional football for 2 years. These are experiences which he needs at this point. So it's about progressing in that case of, there's youth in the Celtic side, which is only going to get better. But for guys like Taylor and whatnot, this experience just now is going to help them. Even guys like Kyogo and Giakoumakis, who are towards the later part of their 20s, are still going to thrive off this, because for them as footballers, that they've not had that consistency at this level, and it's at that level most footballers want to be playing their football at.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you know, like, it's not as if I'm saying, I just want to kind of clarify in case anyone's typing any mad angry comments, but like, what I basically mean when I'm kind of saying that and we're kind of referring to this is, like, if you think about even just the posture that you get from like the Forests and the McGregors that have kind of walked the walk and seen it, if you could sprinkle that into the rest of the team, we probably do get a 5-10% better output from them. And unfortunately, there's no shortcut to that. I think the manager's kind of alluded to that same kind of point where, you know, sometimes you just need to take your bumps and bruises. And I think, again, we've spoken about that before.
Not an overnight fix, etc. That's what he's spoken about.
But again, like, on the minute thing, on the minute thing, Jota's missed the last 2 Champions League games. Out of any attacking player, he has the most Champions League minutes this season. You know, so over the whole campaign, like, Maeda is the 3rd most minutes in the Champions League this season. You know, so behind Jota and Kyogo. So it's that one that everyone has taken a benefit from this year, I think, and it is just unfortunate that we're having to wait till probably like next September or something to see Champions League football again or whatever.
What I was going to say, there was both you and I also, just to kind of clarify the point, aren't saying that Celtic, in terms of infrastructure investment into the team, need to wait 4 or 5 years. We're not just going to, you know, pluck up excuses, say for both here in a year's time on the podcast or whatever, or on Twitter or wherever we are, saying, you know, another excuse or whatever. I think both you and I expect to see progress with Celtic in the Champions League next year, and not a campaign similar to this. Because I think both you and I understand, and there'll be a lot of Celtic fans out there too, that, as you alluded to, Quinny, you had to take your bumps and bruises this season, with the inexperience in the squad, the fact we hadn't been in the competition for so long, and whatnot. We've still got to the Bernabeu. We've not taken any doings, which has been a kind of consistent theme in the Champions League. I was in Munich for that 3-0 game, and it was 3 gone in 9 or 10. Realistically, you know, it was not pretty to watch. Thankfully, the old Hofbrau and the Augustiner had been given at Wally earlier in the day, so we were all right in terms of that. But in terms of the game as a piece, not one I want to remember too well.
No.
But you're hoping that next season, that maybe when you do have a McGregor that drops out, and you can't replace your captain, we all know that. But looking at the Celtic midfield on Tuesday evening, you know, there was a lot of inexperience in terms of O'Reilly, Hatate, and even Haksabanovic in there, who's not fully up to speed yet. And it would be interesting. I read some of Ange's comments, and Haksabanovic, Moy, and Abelgard particularly, who said that all 3 of them were signed to basically peak in the second half of the season. So you brought guys in not expected to do too much of a job for you at this point, and yet there they are playing in the Champions League. So the point I'm
Exactly.
trying to get there, that maybe when you do lose a Jota, a McGregor, or a Starfelt, and it's no disrespect to any of the guys who've came in, because I've all thought that anybody who's came in, particularly Matt O'Reilly, who was man of the match the other night, I think Yates has been absolutely fine at the back. See Kyogo playing that left-hand side the other night, that maybe when they do drop out or you improve their level, that you maybe don't miss it as much. And we're not having a conversation about Callum McGregor or Jota being out the team. Do you understand what I'm getting at by that? I think the
Yeah.
squad is fairly decent at this point in time, but I don't think it's a finished article by any means. And I don't think Ange Postecoglou is quite happy to put his feet up come the January transfer window and pour himself a malt, because that's what he drinks, by the way. He's already said this. He likes a wee whiskey, much like myself. He's not going to put his feet up and pour himself a malt and think, I'm done, this will be fine. He's going to go and improve. He
Yeah.
knows that, and it's how you. It's about being from a good team to an excellent team. It's about elite level sport. That's why Harry Kewell's there. He wanted to show that we weren't
Yeah.
going to stop that old cliche that we know at Celtic so well,
Mhm.
and that's why. But we're going to go out and improve, and that we're not going to maybe feel that loss next season if we're in the Champions League.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think, unfortunately, because and again, if you go back and you have a look at the 11s that we've been starting with, really since that after that opening kind of period of the season, like if we had like a full season, if we had a normal season, I'm sure the manager would want to pick different teams and set these situations up in a controlled environment where it's like, right, okay, we're playing without Callum today. Go and solve the problems. Go and win us the match by playing this way. Or okay, we're playing with Kyogo and Giakoumakis today. This is how we're going to score. Here, and allow all these things to gel in bed. So then, tactically, what the manager wants to do is have all that up his sleeve. So it goes, right, Shakhtar at home. I'm playing Giakoumakis and Kyogo, and everyone knows, right, cool. This is how we're going to do it. And I'm not saying that they wouldn't have known going into last night, but it is rehearsal.
It's the first time I've seen it.
It's patterns of play. It's knowing, me and him are really good at linking up. In this pass, like Giakoumakis' attempted assist for Kyogo, I never thought he had a pass like that in him, and it blew me away. I was like, wow, no look, through ball, breaking the lines, playing it into the box on the angle. Loved it from him. And I think I think it was probably his best performance I've seen from him, like outside of getting a hat trick or whatever, I forgot where I started with all that, sorry.
I think you were kind of in the point of just looking at, the squad being up to speed, but I think it was
Yeah.
probably the
Yeah.
point you were actually getting at, Quinny. And me and you did discuss that St Mirren game on here last week, and I think you're probably putting into the mix of that the World Cup, which I've mentioned on here before, that having the games so few and far between each other, keep going back to Leipzig, 6 days between that
Yeah.
back-to-back tie. There's not been a lot of time to really get a squad who was inexperienced coming into it, right into the competition, which has zapped Celtic's rhythm in domestic football too.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for keeping me back on point there.
That's all right.
But yeah, so I think the manager does want to, he will use the whole squad. He's not made any secret of that. And I think he's been forced to overuse it. And I think that's been that's really been the letdown when it's been all said and done over both the Shakhtar games and maybe one of the Leipzig games. We could have done a bit better to this point. Just through, I say things in those, particularly Leipzig away, things that are out with our control as much as anything, So I think, that's the kind of thing I want to see for the season going forward. Is I still want to see all these different combinations of players in different situations. And it might not be he ever starts again, for example, with Kyogo and Giakoumakis, but maybe we see, when it's we're playing a top 6 team and it's drawing at the 70th minute. That's how we go up a gear sometimes, or, in that kind of idea, because that's what's going to be exciting for the rest of the season, really, in terms of being a Celtic fan, because we expect to win most games now, and by all accounts, there's really no excuse now for fixture pile up is going to ease off massively. You would expect with us having no midweeks after the World Cup.
Yeah, and even though there's going to be a lot of fixtures in January, which we're not too used to with the winter break. The players are going to go out. We were talking about this. They're going to go to Sydney first. They're going to play Sydney FC and Everton over there. Then they're going to go to a warm winter training camp in Portugal. One of the confirmed fixtures is going to be Rennes. So they should hopefully be coming back full fire. And I think the first trip's away to Pitaud on the 17th of December. And you'll want to see probably a different animal coming into games there. And before that January break, then you add in what you've got in January. We've got that semi-final to look forward to against Kilmarnock at Hampden. And it's just about really kicking on and getting to that point, and then gelling the guys in that you bring in January into your team, that by the time August, September rolls round and hopefully we're in the Champions League again, that it's just a seamless transition, and they go, and they're absolutely fine. That seamless transition just now, Quinny, I would argue, works in the league. We've just yet to see it work totally in the Champions League, which comes down to that wee bit of inexperience and maybe just not being at the point that some players want to be at. And going back to Shakhtar, one of the things that impressed me most about them the other night was their setup and how they interacted off the ball. I thought they were absolutely excellent off the ball, Shakhtar, which is something that you maybe don't see too often from us at this level of European football. I think it was a 4-5-1 formation that they were playing,
Yeah.
and off the ball they were just excellent. And even the way they just kind of zapped the energy out Celtic in the early parts of the game. What was your thoughts just in Shakhtar off the ball? Is that something that we probably need to look at in the Champions League next season?
I think it was a bit of a perfect storm for them because, like you say, that kind of 4-5-1 shape. Again, I'll probably just plug it properly. So it's the last time I need to reference it. But if you search Quinny 3001 on TikTok, I did a little video about this when it's like they did so with the midfield three and the back four, they basically, and anyone who's at the game would have definitely seen this, but they basically made like a box of 5 players with one in the middle, all across their defensive kind of in front of their defensive line with the midfield three. If you can imagine this with me explaining it. And but because of the way Rio and O'Reilly wanted to play, and Kyogo for the most part in build-up play was getting onto the defensive line quite close to Giakoumakis. So it was really crowded for us to get through the middle, and they just forced us to do everything out wide. And for their main attack to be, run into space on the break with 2 or 3 bodies, it was just we couldn't have. We didn't change the way we played until guys like Moy and Forrest and that came on. Turnbull, for example, like when Turnbull came on, he was going into the middle of the pitch and demanding to get on the ball. We never really had any of that until Turnbull came on. And I think Turnbull came on with like 5-10 minutes ago. It wasn't very long. He didn't really have much of an opportunity to do anything. Not that I'm saying he would have had he been given longer, but we didn't have any of that. Rio frustrated everyone because when he was on the ball in the middle of the pitch, he wants to turn and give it to someone else so then he can move up the pitch and then try and link with Taylor and Haksabanovic or whoever was on the left at that point. And that suits Shakhtar because they'll just watch him move into position and mark him. And then the defence have got the ball and now they're looking at 3 marked players and it's like, right, okay, we dare you to pass it to somebody, And that just suits Shakhtar.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, again, Rio, in terms of the word frustration that we keep going back to, we saw how his quality at Tynecastle, for talking's sake, and Saturday, we know what he can do, but when it's just not happening for him, it's just like, game's a bogey here, just forget it, which is really, really frustrating. And again, even that point in Turnbull coming off the bench, Celtic's kind of lacked that attacking option in midfield, just with Callum McGregor being out and O'Reilly kind of dropping into that pivot role, not being the kind of playmaker in midfield, so there's a lot of food for thought in that. Last 20 minutes or so, Quinny, but let's kind of look towards Livingston on Sunday. We got to talk to there's no many. I don't think there's anybody who probably goes woo at Livingston apart from you. Back to the spaghetti ad, Tony Macaroni Arena under Davy Martindale. Listen, they got a great result last week, Livingston. Ibrox probably unlucky, maybe not to actually win the game. But just to kind of come on to James Forrest's comments on Tuesday evening after the game, when you and I both spoke to him, but when I kind of asked him about Celtic players not getting too up or down with the results in European football and just kind of getting back to domestic ways, and he said, I think that's what's good with Celtic. If you go for a bad result or a bad game of that, there's always a game a couple of days later to put it right. I think that's the kind of attitude you're always going to have with Celtic, that a couple of days down the line, there's another big game and there's no chance to dwell on performances or results. There's absolutely no. We had that we'll call it a wee run of form, Hibs, Motherwell and Hearts, just about getting back to domestic action and then being in a good positive mindset to go to the Bernabeu on next Wednesday evening, and keeping that same positivity and saying we're going to have a go and play football.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to attack it. And the Livingston game, I think the manager had set up a rotation pattern so that if we did get the result where we would have liked against Shakhtar, it would have probably ran with the same team that played. Let me check the Hearts team again. Yeah, I think he'd have probably played the same team that played against Hearts, and then went full strength, obviously Madrid trying to get something. With the game now in essence being a dead rubber, I looked at the last game of the Europa League group last season. we beat Betis 3-2, and like it was like Bain was in goals,
Yeah,
and like the
I'll get
whole
the lineup because I
it was
remember
wild.
Stephen Bell scored for Celtic.
Yeah,
I want to say as Malia Soro also played for Celtic that night. I know Mikey
he
Johnson
did.
did, and Albin Ayeti
Yep.
also did.
They all started.
I'm going to get this
McCarthy
up here.
started. Liam Shaw started. Uragide was at right back. Liam Scales at left back. Montgomery left winger. And then the subs that came on was like Henderson got a goal, Turnbull, Mikey Johnson an assist. So yeah, so I think the man and Beaton played centre back. you know, so I think the Madrid game, I think we get that kind of rotation against Madrid probably. Like Bernabeu, it'll be great for some of these guys to get the minutes that maybe they haven't had so far. Maybe plays a bad
Bernabeu in the
again.
Bernabeu. How about that one, eh?
Yeah, Bernabeu in
Bernabeu
the
in the
Bernabeu.
Bernabeu.
Maybe Abada gets more minutes because he needs to still really cut his teeth at Champions League level compared to the rest of the forwards. He's just not got anywhere near the amount of minutes.
The only issue I would say, Quinny, is in terms of both the Liga sides. Game at Celtic Park probably is a lot different from going to one of the, if not one of the greatest stadiums, if not the greatest stadium in world football.
Yeah.
And I think even if you're one of those guys who'd maybe be likely to drop out, I think every player will still want to play. And that's the only wee kind of thing I would say. And
Yeah,
it could be a once in a lifetime experience for some of them to play at the Bernabeu. But again,
I think you can still play Jota and Juranovic because I think that's shop window material. Basically if they're fit. So I think there will be maybe not quite to the Betis extent, but with that in mind, I think Livingston at the weekend he goes absolute full what he thinks is the
I
best
think
team.
so. I
Yeah,
think you might change it about like Hearts again. I can
I
definitely
think
see
so.
Bernabeu and Ralston coming in. Ralston particularly due to the fact that if we go back to April time, I want to say, when we won 3-1 through there, he played players who I would say suited the fixture. Ralston came in defence, Beaton came in the middle. I'm sure Yakimakis started up top, and then Forrest.
Yeah,
I don't know if Forrest
I was
started the
looking.
game. I know he certainly scored, but I don't know if he started the game.
So
And it was
the front three that started was
possibly,
Forrest, Maeda, and Jota.
right, okay. Who
Sorry,
played for the middle? Maeda for the middle?
Maeda through the
Must,
middle.
yeah. And it just kind of be Beaton and Ralston and stuff. I thought we played the fixture a wee bit more. Do you think there's a possibility of doing that on Sunday? I certainly think Ralston is a player who suits this type of game.
I was 100% thinking the same thing. I looked at the last two teams that we've played against Livingston, and Ralston's played in both of them. Both played very well. And Beaton played in both of them as well, and both played very well. And I thought, when I seen that, I thought maybe there's a bit of room. Maybe Abelgard starts because
There's
if
a
you want a big,
possibility.
tall defence, if that's what he thinks is the best way to win on that pitch. And I say last time he started Maeda, Giakoumakis came off the bench for 15. O'Reilly and Rio both come off the bench with Abada as well. So that was the last time. And then the time before that, I think it was a draw, maybe 0-0 or something, or 1-1. And again,
We get beat 1-0, didn't we? Because that was the Hoodoo.
The
Was the
last game
Hoodoo
I'm
Stadium?
finding is 0-0. Oh, the last one away, sorry. I was looking at
Yeah.
the game at home, but I'll try and find the one away. No, I can't find it. Oh, no,
We could
I'm
beat
looking at my
1-0.
marbles.
James McCarthy certainly played for Celtic that day, I remember.
I went
I
too
think
far back.
Stephen Welsh was the person that got caught out at the back too. But there was a good few changes actually in the team. Remember Ball and goalie started for Celtic that day at Livingston.
Oh, I found it. Yeah, that rings a bell.
Found it.
Actually.
Ball and goalies there.
Oh, yeah. McCarthy started again as well. Big defensive mid in there. Again, it's Beaton came off the bench. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Like with I do think he plays his fixture away in this stadium because I think it's that type of fixture. Against quite a specific opponent, quite a specific venue, and all the rest of it. So it looks like a Jetty as well played in that one. So I don't know if he maybe fancies the wee man up front rather than a Giakoumakis, but Giakoumakis now is irresistible. I think he has to start.
Oh yeah, especially with his power. Livingston have always been a physical team, whether at Celtic Park or there.
Yep.
And I think for me, Giakoumakis really suits this type of game. But for me, couldn't be looking at consistency obviously with the goalkeeper at the centre half pair that we've seen. I'd probably bring in Ralston for this one.
Yep.
I wouldn't be surprised if he brings in Bernabeu. I think that's something he's quite comfortable now doing. That if you change one full back, you change both. Looking towards possibly playing Juranovic and Taylor in the Bernabeu. And then as well as that, but with Giakoumakis, that's been a real kind of wee partnership I've quite liked. Is Bernabeu bombing down that left hand side, giving you that different outlet. He seems to link up pretty well with Jacko. A person who I think will start at Livingston will be Aaron Moy. I think this is the kind of game that will probably suit him.
Yep.
Abelgard's an interesting shout, whether he keeps O'Reilly in there. It could also be a chance for David Turnbull to possibly get some minutes into his legs too. Just thinking in that midfield. And then on that left-hand side, he possibly might go with Maeda, like he did at Hearts.
Yeah.
And an interesting, Jacko through the middle. And but James Forrest not playing, starting the other night, I think James Forrest probably likely to start at Livingston. What's your thoughts on that? Because I actually said last week that indication that he kind of gives before games that you kind of know that maybe that, with Tynecastle, I thought, Giakoumakis has played 90 minutes. There's absolutely no chance of him starting against Shakhtar. There he was. But do you think maybe like Forrest, for instance, not starting against Shakhtar and Moy, it's a certainty that both start against Livingston on Sunday?
Yeah, I think Moy comes in for a start as well. I think it's quite a difficult puzzle to put together, the team. I think I make you right for the whole defence, except I'm probably going to edge for Taylor over Bernabe still. Forrest, I think
he didn't have his best game at Tynecastle, Bernabe. I don't know if that was just the atmosphere or whatever else, but he did look a wee bit zapped, and I thought we looked far better when Greg Taylor came on. I'm just thinking with that kind of rotation thing, because the manager always does say one game at a time, but Livingston, Real Madrid, they've got a home game against Dundee United. That could be the game that maybe Bernabe plays, isn't it?
Yeah. And he gets him some Champions League minutes as well. I'm just looking at the midfield. So again, like in the Hearts game, like Moy, O'Reilly, and Rio all played 89 minutes together. It wasn't until the 89th minute until one of them came off for Abelgard. So I'm gonna go on a limb, right? I'm gonna say Abelgard, Moy, and I want to say Haksabanovic now. I think that might be the midfield three. And then it's Maeda, Giakoumakis, and Forrest up front. But I think that just sounds too crazy. So I think it will be Abelgard, O'Reilly, and Moy.
Okay.
I think Abelgard, O'Reilly, Moy, and then front three of, I think Maeda starts somehow. I think Giakoumakis is undroppable. And I think, Forrest. Yeah. So I think Haksabanovic probably drops to the bench for this game. And I think Abelgard gets a start.
Yeah, even again,
I'm going on a limb on that. I'm trying to make a prediction with that rather than a safe one.
Listen, it's just trying to get an indication of where the manager's mind's at, probably from the previous game. But kind of looking after this, we looked at this as it was a monster batch of fixtures when we came back from this international break, kicking off with that game against Motherwell at the beginning of October. We're now nearly at the end of October. We've still got the game against Livingston on Sunday. We then go to the Bernabeu. That's European football out the way. It's in Dundee United at Celtic Park, an away trip to Fir Park, home to Ross County. Then it's big line drawn, first part, if you want to call it, the season done. See where we're at it. There's plenty of chances for more minutes under the belt in those three domestic games, isn't there, against Dundee United, Motherwell, and Ross County?
Yeah. And it's like, if we go on through this little part of the season and we start rocking out 5-6 goals a game or whatever, then I think it would just be so typical. It would just be so typical. We're like, where was this golden touch 2 weeks ago? Kind of thing. So I'm quietly optimistic and hopeful in that sense. I'm just looking at this team again.
Not that you'd be too disappointed if we were thumping teams like that.
No, not far from it.
Just in terms of, I want to go back to this, Quinny, because it was something that you said possibly last week or 2 weeks ago, Moritz Jenz. I'm certainly of the opinion that Celtic should sign him permanently.
Yeah.
But going forward, maybe possibly after the break, do you see Starfelt coming back into to partner Cameron Carter-Vickers?
I think Jens's performances over the last 3 games have been stellar. I think it's really hard for I think it's really hard to see Starfelt walking into the team. I don't think that's happening anymore. He'll definitely need to his pass accuracy last night, again 2 nights ago, was phenomenal. He's looked really good. I don't think he's put a foot wrong in the Champions League at all. And I think domestically, sometimes he loses the ball, right? But I was saying this in the build-up to this game as well, is see when we're playing that keep ball, move from left to right and look for the opening to come like we've been doing in the absence of Callum McGregor. At some point in a game, you need centre-backs to do one of 2 things, ideally 1 or 2 times in the match. One of them is do the Van Dijk thing, where they just step into midfield and they take 20 yards out the picture, or they do the same thing but with a pass. And Carter-Vickers isn't either able or willing to do that. Really, he doesn't like doing that at all. I don't think it's his role. I don't think
He's
it's his
just a
job.
muscle man. He's just a
Yeah.
fridge. He just stands there and sorts anybody out.
Starfelt has been good at that, but I think every time when people have levied massive criticism at Starfelt and said, "Oh, he's no da da da," it's when he's been in that role rather than just being a defender, as it were. So I think Jenz, like, he does for the partner to Vickers. I think he's the best we've got.
That's an interesting one. I am of the opinion that Starfelt probably will come back in. But the thing that I'm probably most excited about is Jota getting back into that team. Hopefully, maybe after this wee run, I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see him get some minutes in the Bernabeu because it's probably the one he'll be wanting to get back and try and feature in. But it's important that I think we've got those free kind of domestic games, and it's free that you're looking at. You're not having to travel too far. Two's at Celtic Park, and one's just doing the motivating Motherwell. So I think that's also a real positive for Celtic. Quinny, if we get to that break, Ross County, and we'll be on a couple of times, I think, before then. We're sitting at the top of the table. See, we've still got the cushion that we've got just now. I think it's 4 points. I think I'd be fairly happy, even though we're out the Champions League. We've got through that semi-final of the League Cup. We're at the top of the table, which is where you would hope it would be. The only second point will be the Champions League. But to me, again, much like European football, it doesn't define Celtic's season this year at all.
No, well, I don't know. I think there was so much anticipation going into this season that the Champions League campaign will be forever kind of tied to whatever happens this season, unless we were doing mid trebles and whatever. But I don't know. It feels like, I think we'll get the results. Again, looking at the form, like I was looking at this before we came on as well, right? See, over the last 15 games in the Champions League and the league, so over the last 15 games across those two competitions, the top the top person with actual assists is Maeda. The top goal scorer is Furuhashi on 10 goals. And like, we have been doing really well in the league. I think it's easily forgotten that, like how well we started the season, that initial extra pre-season period. So I say I can just see us kind of, there'll be probably a bit of disappointment in amongst the group, but it's such a high competitive environment for starting 11 positions that, like you heard, like Forrest was saying, there's just no time to breathe. There's no time to move on, so it's just back to the pump and let's get back at it.
Yeah, and you're hoping that when we do get back at it at Livingston, the hoodoo for a start is off the back, because it was becoming a bit ridiculous that you were going there dreading it and thinking, oh no, what's going to happen today? We're going to get beat. It's going to be a draw. It's going to be a terrible game to watch. You're hoping that hoodoo is now off your back and it's a ground that you go to, like Pittodrie's been in recent years, like, Tynecastle's become, that you go there fully confident that we're going to go out there and we're going to win the game and give them it, which just hasn't been the case. But it's going to be important that we go there and bounce back right away. And also that victory at Tynecastle last week gives you that wee bit of breathing space that if anything does go wrong, we're hoping it doesn't, Quinny, that it won't affect you too much, if you know what I mean by that.
Yeah, no, I get you. And again, with them drawing against Rangers last week, they'll be pretty buzzing with themselves. Livingston, they're not going to make it easy for us, but like the managers, I think with some domestic situations, like the manager himself can go into these matches better prepared than we've done in the past. And I know, like you say, all the results with Livingston haven't been, a loss and a draw in recent record as we were talking about. But yeah, I think the manager picks a team to win this game. Like you mentioned at the very beginning, like play the fixture, Livingston away, who comes in, and so I feel expected to be a good result. And again, bearing in mind, their kind of record or whatever, I think if we score 3 goals, it's a great result. And if we can get a clean sheet, it's a jackpot. 3-0 for me.
Absolutely. As long as you're winning Sunday, I think I'll be delighted. I'm getting to see Bob Dylan later that night too, so I'm hoping for quite a good Sunday. Rounded off before I head off to Madrid. So an exciting couple of days for myself with that. In terms of, just going back for this last kind of 5 minutes, but we spoke quite at length about Champions League, Quinny, and about the inexperience which exists in the team. That experience not being an overnight fix for someone that they had to take those scalps. How ambitious do you expect Celtic to be in January? And what do you think that means for this squad currently?
I'm very excited about transfer potential in January because again, I think we were talking about this last week, but like if you have 10 million quid, right, who knows what the budget is, right? But if you get 10 million quid to go and get a player or two, then what position do you buy for? Because I think Jenz and Vickers, like it would be pretty expensive to upgrade either of them. At fullback, again, like unless we're selling one of them, it feels a bit redundant. Get another one. And then in midfield, when McGregor's fit, we're two to a position. You know, if you include even like Degucci and McCarthy who are knocking around the club still. So then when you go up to the up front, it's do you get another centre forward, like another real centre forward is then kind of maybe the shout. But people are telling me that's the position Kyogo plays, and Kyogo can't play out wide, or Kyogo can't play that kind of role he did on Tuesday. So then, you know, is that putting, you know, so then is that folly? Because equally, because then you've got Kyogo and Giakoumakis who are going to keep this new signing out probably. So if you're going to go and spend big in the team and upgrade a position, I really struggle to imagine where you go.
It could be possible that the Yates deal gets done in January, and we've still to pay for Monet's obviously, and that's £3 million quid, so that could be part of the January spending. I don't know if that'll be in with the budget or whatever. That could be one. You might be looking possibly at, you know, other markets that Celtic's not exposed, and looking possibly as well. We're going to have a World Cup where there's going to be a lot of eyes on particularly some of our players. Juranovic, I think, is going to be one of them. I know people were very frustrated with him the other night when he didn't, you know, hold down Mudryk or whatever, but it's done, draw the line with it. But if he performs well for Croatia at the World Cup, there's going to be people sniffing, and even if he doesn't depart the club, whether it's in January, whether it's next summer, because we don't want to be selling off our top quality talent, Quinny, it's still important that we're planning ahead with these guys. And that might be the step that we're already taking in January, that possibly somebody comes in that is going to be their replacement or whatever. And it's not a case of waiting to the last minute, bring them in, then try and get them bedded into the team and stuff. That they're there, they're playing, and they're ready to go whenever that point comes.
Yeah. And I think we've got a lot of like bedrock players in the team, like that we've recently acquired, that over the next 3 years, if people do leave, there's other guys that are not really in that same jeopardy. Guys like Moy and Ralston and Taylor, and of course McGregor. Maybe throw Turnbull into that, depending on his form and your transfer profile, as it were. So I think we're in a really good position now to kind of continue that kind of vein. But it's just when you hear the manager talking about the transfers, he's like, no, we are like not messing around. We already are moving forward, and we always want to improve and get better and stronger. Like that just excites the crap out of me, because when you think about some of the signings we brought in from Japan, Argentina, Bernabe, and even going into Russia to get Abelgard and Haksabanovic, it's been nice areas. It's been nice places to go and get bargains from. And if we're still going to be shopping with that kind of
mindset,
but with a bit of a better, so like for example, and again I was looking at this in preparation for today, but like guys like Maeda, Rio Patati and whatever, they actually have all played Asian Champions League for what that's worth prior to coming to Celtic also. Bernabe, on the other hand, of course, as we know, was a youth backup bench guy that we've seen something in and we've tried to grab him before he goes hot.
Mm-hmm.
Next time we go into these markets again, I would like to see if we are going to be pulling somebody out, again, it's somebody that has a bit more of a, oh wow, this guy actually cost 10 million quid and we had to fight off PSV and Benfica for him or something, you know. That's, you know, if we are going to be going into those markets, that's the kind of transfer that would really signal to me like, wow, that's a, you know, we're really trying to match up with what has been demonstrated to be how to build a squad that can compete the way we want one to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally agree with that. It's going to be interesting to see what Celtic do in January. We're still a long way off from there, but I think it blends into the conversation that we've had with Champions League next year, because the plans in place to go in the Champions League next year and compete will begin in January. They've probably already begun. We know they've begun actually with comments that the manager's spoken about Mark Lowell, getting those players down. And again, it blends into the conversation that we had earlier on about infrastructure, ambition at Celtic, and really going for it and trying to take us that level up that we need to be consistent at this level. Quinny, I think we'll maybe yourself solo next week, or maybe with another guest on, because I'll be in my holidays off to sunny Spain. So might be the last time we're talking Champions League on here. It's been a pleasure over these group stages to be chatting about it. We'll be back with plenty of content. I might be absent next week, but we'll certainly be back after that with a kind of run into the last fixtures, and we'll try and be here throughout the World Cup. We've got some exciting plans that we're kind of drawing up early on just now to get into that. So thanks as always to all our regular listeners, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're listening to. Hail, hail, and thank you for listening to the Celts Are Here weekly flag.